What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily. So it might be hard to believe, but the Samsung Galaxy A51 is nearly a full year old now. It was released in mid-December 2019, and basically by January, it had quickly become one of the most popular mid-range devices. And it's remained that way throughout the year. In fact, I personally believe this phone, along with the A71, not only helped reshape the broader mid-range smartphone space this year, but these A-series devices likely had a significant impact on the direction Samsung eventually took with their smartphones. The A51 5G and A71 5G, after all, are heavily promoted here in the US, and the S20 FE, a much cheaper alternative to the flagship, has sort of made the higher-end devices irrelevant. More affordable, but still plenty capable devices are what people want right now, and the A51 is the quintessential example of that. Now, I've had my regular A51 here for nearly the full year, and in my time using this phone, and having compared it to countless other devices now, I still keep coming back to it, simply because it's a solid, well-rounded smartphone that offers just about everything you could ask for. And each time I look, the price gets better and better. So in this video, I'm not only going to talk about my experience with this phone this year, but I'll also let you know my thoughts on the newer A51 5G as well. And most importantly, I'll share my thoughts about getting this phone right now and heading into 2021, and whether or not we'll be seeing an A52 anytime soon. So to start off, I think it's important that we understand the couple variations of A51 devices that are available now. This original A51 was released in mid-December 2019. It's the international version, but it's also sold in the US unlocked and through various networks. I think it's what most people think of when they reference this phone, and while it originally launched for more than $300 and even close to $400 here in the US, you can get one unlocked now from places like Amazon for closer to $260. And let me just say, anything under $300 for this phone is a steal, no matter the configuration you might get. Now, in the summer, Samsung also launched the A51 5G, both internationally and in the US. And for US folks in particular, Samsung and the big carrier networks have been heavily promoting that phone too. You might be asking yourself, okay, besides 5G support, what's the real difference? And really, the A51 5G gets a slightly larger battery, a bump up in processor and RAM, and that's kind of it. The whole rest of the phone is the same. You wouldn't be able to tell them apart just by looking at them, and there weren't any other additional features or new things offered with the A51 5G. Obviously, the A51 5G is the newer, slightly more powerful device, but the problem, in my opinion, really is the price. Samsung sells the A51 5G for $499. A lot of the US carriers have it priced there too, $400 to $500. Verizon even has it higher than that. And sure, Samsung has some holiday deals and trade-in offers that might bring the price down, and the networks have sign-up bonuses for new customers. But here's the bottom line. Between the regular A51 that I have here and the A51 5G, you get, in my opinion, minuscule upgrades, really, but for literally hundreds of dollars more. I've said in multiple videos now that I personally do not think the A51 5G and by extension the A71 5G are worth the extra money, especially here in the US when the S20 FE 5G exists and when this original A51 is just way, way cheaper. And I think the whole point of this phone is affordability anyway. So to sum things up with the pricing and availability, I think the regular year-old original A51 is still the one to get, especially now that it's even cheaper. And I think if you have more money to spend, it just makes way more sense to jump up to the S20 FE 5G over the A51 and A71 5Gs, since you're actually getting a way better phone from top to bottom. And if you guys are interested in doing some comparison shopping of your own, I'll leave some links down below in the video description to all the various Samsung phones that I'm talking about, so you can see for yourself what's available and what kind of deals are offered. So check down there so you don't miss out. Physically, I thought the A51 looked great when it first came out, and now a year later, I still think it holds up well to anything released in 2020. In fact, I don't expect smartphones to change that much next year either. You've got a small hole punch camera cutout at the top, which goes nearly unnoticed, slim, minimal bezels all around, and what I like most about this phone in particular is how thin it feels in the hand. It has more of a contoured back and edge versus some other devices, and that allows for some comfortable one-handed use if it fits for you. Now, at 6.5 inches, it's certainly not a small phone, so it won't necessarily be right for everyone, but it's shorter and slimmer than both the A71 and S20 FE, and really for folks in the US, this is, I guess, the smallest mid-range or higher tier smartphone Samsung even launched this year. Europe and Asia got the A41, which is even smaller. The A01 is a budget device. So if you want specifically a smaller Samsung phone that isn't the flagship S20, I think this is a lot of people's only option that was released this year, at least. Now, back when this phone first came out, I may have been a little critical about the plastic form factor. The shiny, glossy rear housing is supposed to mimic glass, though you can certainly tell it is a cheaper material. I still think it looks nice, the rainbow effect is kind of cool, and the polished chrome sides do a nice job of sort of faking a flagship design. But with the Note 20 having a plastic rear cover this year, and the S20 FE also being covered in plastic, I guess I've just sort of stopped caring about materials as much. It probably keeps costs down, it's certainly more durable than glass, and for the price, I don't think you can expect much more than this. Most importantly, unlike previous A-series phones that tended to get really scratched up pretty easily, this plastic has held up way better, so that I think is worthy of some praise. You might notice that the front display on this phone looks a bit beat up, but don't worry, that's just the cheap screen protector that came pre-installed on this phone actually. It's not the physical screen. I kept the screen protector on just out of sheer laziness more than anything. It's pretty crappy and it got scratched up almost immediately, but it's done the job it's supposed to, I guess, namely protect the screen, and that's really what matters. The rest of the sort of physical aspects of this phone are kind of hit or miss. On the one hand, you've got a headphone jack, which is nice. Some people still value that, and there's SD card expansion, so two positives. But there's no water resistance rating, no wireless charging support, a maximum 15-watt USB-C charging standard, and a single speaker setup, which, don't get me wrong, still sounds pretty good, but it's no match for dual stereo sound. All in all, those physical attributes may or may not be something you value in a smartphone. I can certainly look past some of them, but they are an indication of this device not only being sort of a cheaper mid-range phone, but also perhaps being a little behind the times now after a year. One thing I think that really holds up with this phone though is the display. The 6.5-inch screen is Samsung's Super AMOLED panel. It comes in at a resolution of 2400 by 1080, packing in 405 pixels per inch, and this I think is probably what most people will appreciate on a phone like this. This display has been great. It offers a fantastic viewing experience, colors really pop, it's plenty bright, and for the price especially, you have nothing to complain about. This is what Samsung does best on their more affordable devices, especially their A series. But looking ahead, I think 90Hz and 120Hz displays will be the theme of 2021, and while some manufacturers are already putting at least 90Hz panels in their $300 to $400 phones, I don't think Samsung will do that with their A series, unfortunately. Samsung hasn't released a 90Hz phone. 120Hz did reach the S20 FE, but I doubt it'll trickle down any lower than that. I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't really see it happening. And if that's the case, this 1080 resolution AMOLED setup is probably what we'll get again on an A52. So more reason still to just consider this phone. Something I kind of wish Samsung would ditch on their A series phones next year is actually the in-display fingerprint reader. This, for me, on the A51 has just not been great. it hasn't gotten that much better through software updates, and compared to what shipped on the S20 FE, it feels like night and day. This one is just so slow and inconsistent. I'm grateful to have it, given what 2020 has been all about, but a physical button sensor like on the M51 would be way better in this case. Fortunately, Face Unlock, when you can utilize it, is great. The phone unlocks basically right away when I look at it. Now, if you remember at the start of the video, I explained that the main difference between the various A51 models is with the internal specs. So let me go over all of that, and I'll try to offer up my thoughts on it all. This regular A51 is powered by the Exynos 9611 chipset and either 4, 6, or 8 gigs of RAM. You can get any configuration depending on where you live. The international A51 5G gets the newer Exynos 980 and either 6 or 8 gigs of RAM. And the US variants, the A51 5G UW or ultra wideband, ships with the Snapdragon 765G chipset and 6 gigabytes of RAM. No other configuration options to choose from. For me, this regular A51 has been great for anything I've needed it to do. I do have 4 gigs of RAM, and I kind of wish I had more at times, certainly. Load times with games are a little slower than I would have liked, and app management suffers from time to time too. But would I pay $500 for the 5G version of this phone? Absolutely not. The overall user experience, even with the lower level specs, has been totally fine. It's great even in most cases. And when you push it a little hard with graphics heavy games, it can handle it all just fine. For well under $300, I have no issues with this set of specs. For well over $400 or $500, I definitely have some issues with what you're paying for on the A51 5G models. If I had one recommendation, it would probably be to get this regular A51 with 6 gigs of RAM instead. That I think is the right balance, and the only thing I'd change if I could. But everything else about this phone has been great, and even like 6 months from now, I don't see it having any issues. It also will likely be one of the first phones to get new Samsung software updates too. It got the One UI 2.5 update pretty quickly, and Android 11 with One UI 3 is coming soon to this device, so that's great. I think this phone has another 2 years of solid life left in it at least, and likely more, so the overall investment to me, even still, is really solid. And battery life on this phone for me has been pretty great too. Yes, you do get a 4,500 milliamp battery with the 5G versions of the A51, while this version of the phone has a 4,000 milliamp battery inside, but the 5G versions have a more powerful processor to manage and the whole 5G thing too, so it may end up evening out in the end. Throughout the year, there hasn't been an instance where this phone hasn't lasted me a full day, no matter what I was doing, and I've been really happy with how it's been able to perform. One aspect of this phone that I think sort of paved the way for mid-range phones to follow this year has actually been the camera setup. I've said this before, but most of the early 2019 A series phones just had really mediocre cameras. But this year, Samsung, I think, put a majority of their effort into camera tech, and it really paid off. The quad lens setup here is plenty capable. The 48 megapixel main lens takes great standard shots. The wide angle is super useful. The macro lens for super close-up photography is not something I ever use. I'd rather have a telephoto lens, I guess. And the depth sensor, I suppose, is still necessary for this phone, but I've taken some fantastic pictures and videos with the phone this year. You've probably seen them all at this point in a bunch of different camera comparisons. And if maybe you've had and used a mid-range device in the past, or even one of Samsung's own A-series devices, and weren't too impressed by the camera, maybe you even thought it was pretty terrible like I used to, I'd recommend giving this phone another look because it's just much improved. Now, yes, camera tech in general has come a long way, especially in 2020 and especially on flagship phones, but I don't think Samsung is doing anything too crazy next year with the new A-series phones either. They'll likely just refine this setup again. Maybe you'll have some better zoom capabilities or improved video stabilization, but what you have here right now is likely going to be the basis for next year too, and what is offered now is still really good. So looking ahead, let's think about what the A52 A52 might look like. And to be honest, I suspect it'll look very similar to this phone. I guess more appropriately, it'll be closer to the A51 5G, and I think it'll be a very minor upgrade. I don't see the A52 getting a high refresh rate display or QHD resolution. I think the A52's camera setup will be nearly identical. Maybe you'll get a 64 megapixel main lens from the A71, but most everything else should be the same. The specs will change for sure, 6 or 8 gigs of RAM as the minimum probably. It should get the Snapdragon 750G chipset with 5G support obviously. But if you're looking for some crazy new device with lots of new features at an even more affordable price with the A52, I just don't really see it happening. The big question really is, should you even wait for that phone? And in my mind, I don't think so. If you want the A51, get it now and enjoy it, because I don't think you'll be missing much more from the A52. The same goes for the A51 5G, even more so I think. If you can get a good deal on that phone, sure, go for it. The A52 5G will probably be the same price. You likely won't be able to get any good holiday deals on that phone, and I just don't think it'll be a huge upgrade anyway. I fully suspect this A51 to be a great buy well into 2021 and beyond, and I don't think there's any reason not to consider it right now or even a few months from now. So there you go. Those are my updated thoughts on the A51 after a year. What do you guys think about this phone? I know some of you likely have it, so I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course, from your own personal experience. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.